Well, welcome to the 5 Ways to Wellbeing podcast, Inga. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Luke. It's very kind.
And, I usually start by saying thank you for making the journey down, but I should also say thank you for the lift.
No, it's more than all right. It was a pretty smooth drive, to be fair, wasn't it?
It was good. Yeah, and just to add a bit of context for those listening in, my car decided to break down last night. I gave Inga a call. I said we're going to have to reschedule the podcast, but straight away you offered me a lift.
I was mentally prepared for today, so nothing was going to get in the way, really.
Well, it's lovely to have you here, and one of the first time I met you was in the Sharp office, and we wanted to get to know you guys a little bit better. So what I did is I asked everyone to go round, introduce themselves, and what struck me about you is one of the first things you talked about was mental health, and that really shone through that your first interest was other people rather than what you'd achieved personally, and I thought that was very admirable.
No, it was a huge privilege with work. I did my mental health first aider course. I think that was probably only a couple of weeks before yourself and Will came in. So I sort of felt it was appropriate. In fact, I think it was Nick sort of prompted it. I think he mentioned that I'd done it. But yeah, I had no idea that you had a sort of ulterior motive, as it were, as lovely as it is. So yeah, I was happy to talk about it, something I'm hugely passionate about. So yeah, massive privilege to be able to come down today and have a chat on. Yeah,
well, it's great to have you here. And I think that's important in sales, particularly, is to understand the person that you're perhaps trying to sell to, or even just the person you're trying to meet. And that follows through into supporting people with their mental health, right, is to take an interest in what matters to them, and to understand what's going on for them. And like you said, for you, it was you'd recently gone through the mental health first aid training. To me, it's obvious that you care about mental health.
Yeah, no, hugely.
But perhaps you could begin by telling us why do you care about mental health? Was there a cause that prompted you to be so passionate about it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think obviously I'm quite young. I'm 22, but I've got quite a long sort of standing history with mental health. So when I was at school and I was 14, unfortunately, one of my friends passed away due to suicide, which was obviously really awful. So that sort of spurred it, I suppose. So from a very young age, I was really interested in learning more about mental health and its causes and how to help and how to talk. Obviously I saw what that did to my year group, to my parents. I went to the memorial. I saw the repercussions of that sort of awfulness. So I was very early on very interested in it all. And then, unfortunately, another one of my friends, who's all of them gorgeous human beings, passed away when I was in my final year at uni. And then another friend, unfortunately, earlier this year passed away as well. All three of them suicide, all three females, all friends for a long time. So I suppose that's a very succinct way of explaining it all. But I've always had an interest in mental health and how it sort of manifests in different people. And with Sharp being my first sort of big girl job, as it were, I think I've been incredibly lucky to enter a workplace that's so supportive and have bosses such as Nick, who, has really sort of supported me through wanting to do the mental health first aid course, come down here today. So, yeah, that's a very sort of brief overview, but I hope that covers it well enough.
So going through a challenge or certainly a crisis moment, very challenging. I haven't lost a friend in those circumstances, let alone three. But would you say that your reaction to that crisis or that challenge was to put some action in?
I think so, yeah. I think grief is an incredibly strange emotion. After each of the three deaths and other deaths that have happened in other circumstances, I've reacted very differently. Obviously being 14, your brain's still developing. It was the first time it happened. I was at boarding school at the time, so away from my family. So I think in my head I thought, what can I do to help? What can I do to try and stop this, try and open up the conversation around mental health in younger people? And I sort of did lots of research, a lot of YouTube videos and reading articles and all of that, trying to just absorb as much as I could so that I felt comfortable talking to people about how they were feeling, and whether that was, exam stress doing GCSEs or A-levels, or, during all of university, people being stressed for a multitude of different reasons. yeah, I think I really want to be able to be that person that people are able to think, oh, I'm having a bit of a rubbish time. I wonder if Inga's got a spare 5 minutes or something. So I'd like to get to that point. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but I want to be able to sort of chat on with people and help them in their sort of mental health journey, I suppose.
And you are a mental health first aider
Yes,
at Sharp, and they put you through that course. And so are you able to use that training to offer people your time?
Yeah, no, completely. I think it's interesting when people sort of approach me, because obviously I'm a bit younger than the average person in my workplace. So when people do want to talk to me, I think it often starts off as a bit of a informal conversation rather than, oh, I want to speak to you because you're the mental health first aider. It's sort of like a slow burn. So one day they'll maybe mention that they're feeling stressed, and then I'll bring it up and say, do you want to go and get a coffee and just have a quick chat? So sort of practicing my skills in that way, and also showing them that just because I might be, the same age as their daughter or something, I'm still able to help in some capacity. And the training definitely gave me an incredible amount of skills. Obviously, my history of mental health has been more sort of like suicide, depression, anxiety. I didn't really learn anything about things like psychosis or OCD. There's so many different things you can learn about in that space. So I think the training was really, really vital for me to understand mental health from multiple different sort of perspectives, I suppose.
And would you say that, of course, Sharp are supportive of mental health and embrace the idea of supporting their colleagues with mental health, as evidenced by the first aid training.
Yeah.
Also evidenced by their support for you to come today, which was, a day out the office, money in the petrol. How does that make you feel as an employee when you have an employer like that?
I think, as I said earlier, I feel extremely fortunate. You always hear the sort of nightmare stories, and joining onto a grad scheme, you hear of a lot of my friends going through really difficult times with their employers just for different reasons. But the fact that, I can quite happily say to my line manager and boss, I've got therapy on Thursday morning. Is it all right if I come in an hour late? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Or I know that they're currently looking for a mental health first aider for the Warrington office. Can I go for that? Yeah, absolutely. There's another course I'm doing in January, which is specifically suicide mental health first aid, sort of focused on suicide a bit more. And again, it wasn't even like I had to really ask. Obviously you do, because it's my first job. I want to make a good impression. But I think they've been incredibly supportive, and they know my history with mental health, and they know what I've been through. Obviously losing my friend earlier this year in April, I sort of mentioned that as soon as I found out. And immediately, my line manager and boss were both completely supportive. If you need to take some days off, that's all right. When the funeral is, if you need to take that day off, it's fine. Don't worry, it won't come out of your holiday. So I'm very privileged in that sense, 100%.
It sounds like you're very well connected in your company in terms of your relationship with your manager, perhaps with HR, indeed with L&D, or anyone who works around you. And do you find those connections are making a positive impact on your mental well-being?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think having that sort of strong support system outside of work is just as important as inside of work, really. It's where I think the statistic is like we spend a third of our lives at work. So it's so important to enjoy going into work and like the people you work with. So I think being connected and chatting on, I'm a very chatty person, as I'm sure everyone will be able to tell quite quickly. It's definitely a nice feeling to know that going into work, people are conscious of what's happened, and they'll listen if you have a worry just as much as you'll listen if they have a worry. So no, it's definitely good. I think Sharp's got a fab sort of mindset in the fact that it is a huge company. It's massive. It's across basically the whole of the world, really. But the fact that going into the office doesn't feel like I'm really distant from everyone else. I can talk to anyone from majority of the sectors and feel quite comfortable chatting on with them about, what's going on in their lives, how their weekend was, what they're doing for, the Christmas party, whatever. We're recording in December, if that seems really out of touch, if you're listening in March.
Well, hopefully it'll be a bit more sunny. Well, it is really sunny today, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely sunnier down here than it is in Manchester.
A bit warmer in March, and the cricket season will be closer, so I'll be a lot happier. But, the 5 ways to wellbeing, like, the reason we at Consalia set this podcast up is we believe the 5 Ways to Wellbeing is a really simple framework. So it's not clinical. We're not offering advice akin to what you would expect from a psychiatrist.
Not qualified.
No, and we're just promoting the 5 Ways by getting salespeople to come in and talk about their experiences of it, because, of course, most of our audience are salespeople.
Yeah.
That's also what I love about the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, is it is simple. So on one hand, yes, it's non-clinical.
So accessible as well.
It's accessible, right? So people can listen to what you say, and it doesn't matter who they are. I expect that they will be able to identify with your experience.
Yeah, some kind of connection, I suppose.
Yeah, some sort of connection, and it hopefully gives them a chance to reflect, to feel supported, that they've heard another salesperson talk openly about mental health. But it might give them some ideas.
Yeah, it's so important to open up the conversation. I think we've definitely come leaps and bounds in the sort of space of talking about mental health, but it's something I don't think anyone could ever talk about enough. It's so important, especially for the youth of today. I think it's just vital that we open up the conversation and make sure that everyone knows that they're going to be supported no matter what they're going through at that time.
We've talked about this a lot already. It's one of the 5 ways that seems to flow through any mental health intervention, i.e. talking about your issues, or in the context of the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, it is connect. And that might be, for example, speaking to someone new, taking an interest in them, asking them how their weekend was to create those connections. So my first question to you, Inga, is how do you connect with others?
Yeah, I think, as I've said, I'm quite chatty. I do love having a talk on. I've got an amazing group of friends, an amazing family, amazing group of colleagues. So reaching out and just having those touch points, I think, is really important. Whether that's just, are you free for a 5-minute chat, or, while you're getting coffee. But outside of that, I think connecting with people that you may not think you could have a connection with. So I've written down here, chat on with the coffee barista. Like this morning when I went to go and get the almond pastries, the lady at the checkout was lovely. So I had a nice chat on with her about, the classic English thing, weather, it's freezing, isn't it? All that kind of stuff, or at least the sun's shining. But I think, finding those little moments of joy and connection in just everyday life. If you're on a walk, say hi to someone that's taking their dog out, say hi to the dog. It's those tiny little things that will bring yourself maybe a small smile, and then that other person as well. I think it's a really nice thing. But I also sort of pop down here, make sure you also connect with yourself, which I know is kind of outside of it, but I think it's really important to sort of tune into how you're doing. So I often use journaling to sort of write about my feelings and emotions and stuff, because I get very easily overwhelmed. So I think having that space and the ability to think, I've connected with so many people today, how am I feeling on the back of that? Do I feel better for doing it? Do I feel like my energy is a bit low? Do I feel like my energy is a bit higher? I think it's important to, sort of think about it in multiple different ways. But overall, I think, just have a good chat on and make sure you're checking in with everyone.
Now that's very positive. So that's when you're proactive, you're feeling good, and you're managing your mental health well.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to connect with people when you're having a low day?
Oh, it can be really tough. I'm sure you can appreciate, I'm sure listeners can appreciate as well. Sometimes you wake up and you just think, I just can't be bothered. I literally had a day like this last week. I went into work and I was miserable. I was serious, thunder face, all of that kind of stuff. And, my colleagues picked up on it pretty quickly, because usually I'm sort of quite cheery, bubbly, whatever. And I sort of just mentioned it to one of my colleagues, and we were having a bit of a conversation about it. And, they asked, how are you doing? I said, I'm fine, I'm just having a bit of a rubbish day. And they went in again and said, no, Inga, something's wrong. How are you doing? And that sort of secondary question, just posed twice, I feel like it can elicit such a different response, because then I sort of broke down a bit and was like, I'm actually having a really rubbish day. I don't know what it is. Nothing bad's really happened. I'm just having one of those days. And we had a really good conversation around it. And then I went home after that at the end of the work day, and I called my mum. Got a very supportive family. I'm very fortunate. And sort of offloaded to her a bit. And, she's always good at listening and sort of going through that with me. So I think that's what I do when I'm struggling myself, is maybe say to people if they're trying to offload to me, I'm not in the right mindset right now. I can't give you the support I want to give you right now. Could we maybe revisit tomorrow or this afternoon, or I'll send you an email? And setting those boundaries, I think, inside your own mind is really important.
It also explains why it's a team effort, mental health, why we need to have connections, because on that day last week when you were struggling, what prompted, sounds like it prompted you out of that negative mindset was some loving friends who took an interest in you, and perhaps shared some of their positivity. A bit like you today, you don't know how much of a difference you made to the woman in Tesco. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You know, you got energy from it, and you thought it was a nice experience, but you don't know what's going on in her life. Yeah, and exactly. Actually you might have been the only nice customer today.
Yeah, well, I think it's such a human thing, is just these small acts of kindness. And you hear about it all the time, whether it's, you know, getting a friend a coffee, or, you know, getting some almond croissants this morning. It's like the tiniest little things sometimes can have such a positive impact, and both as the receiver of those tiny acts, you know, whether that's someone just going, do you want me to get you a coffee, or, you know, someone saying, I've got a parcel for you from downstairs, or it's the other way around and you're helping someone else out. I think it's a very human and quite a beautiful way, actually, of sort of showing someone that you care and that you know, you're there for them no matter what might be going on for them.
I've learnt the importance of phoning people when I'm not in a good mental state. And funny enough, calling you yesterday sort of untangled an issue for me. I was fretting in my own head. Oh, what do I do? My car's not working. You know, my mind will take me to. It'll be like lasagna brain a lot of the time. Like I just can't structure together some rational thought. But actually, I thought, okay, well, what's the best thing to do in this situation? Well, I'll just ring Inga and tell her what's going on. Yeah. And then you offered a solution which seemed to untangle the problem. Yeah. And I feel a lot better today. Yeah. But where I was yesterday, I wasn't feeling very good. And that to me is a great example of connecting with others to offload. And for me, the simple action is picking up the phone. Yeah, because you could have very easily sent me an email and said it's off, car's broken. And I think if I'd got that email, I wouldn't have then said, why don't I pick you up? Because I didn't know where you were based or anything. So yeah, it's something as simple as that. Emails and texts and instant messages, they're a very closed form of communication. They're very direct. And yeah, you can't hear intonation or anything as well, which is, I mean, obviously in sales as well, it's so important, but having a phone conversation with someone you can sort of hear. I could tell you were a bit panicked, and so then I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Yeah, and you could probably tell I was a bit disappointed that I might not have been able to get here today. So you're more likely to then offer a solution. If you see that over text, you might be thinking, I might then pass on the lasagna brain to you, because you might then be thinking 1,000 reasons why Luke didn't want to meet today. Yeah. That's sometimes where my mind takes me, and I overread things, and actually, you know, talking is just so powerful. You know, very quickly when I made that phone call yesterday, you were quick to give. Like you were happy to go out of your way. Funnily enough, you didn't even ask where I lived before you offered a lift. Yeah, that's my geography is horrendous. Just as well I don't live in Scotland. Yeah, well, it might have ended up coming up, yeah. But you might have withdrawn the offer if that was the case. But, you know, the same way as when I initially asked you to do the podcast, it was straight away, yes, what can I do to give my time? And now the 5 ways to wellbeing suggests that giving is actually really good for mental wellbeing. Yeah. For me, what makes giving so good or so helpful to mental well-being is I'm not stuck in myself. Yeah. So if I'm thinking about another person, then I feel, for example, an absence of selfishness, a real negative emotion that can dictate, certainly in my experience, can dictate my life. So when I'm giving to someone else, whether that's money, time, or resources, whatever it might be, I actually feel quite well. Now, what's your experience around that? Do you find that altruism makes you feel better? Yeah, I think that
yeah, as I said, sort of doing small acts of kindness is, in a way, it's giving, whether that's even just a smile, it can be so small. It doesn't really have to cost you anything. Like being polite to Lady in Tesco today, to go back to it, I didn't have to do that. A lot of people choose not to do that, and that's all right. They might be in their own heads that day. They might be having a really rubbish day and very focused on what's going on in their sort of internal world. But I think that there's some kind of statistic about it, that people that do something nice for someone every day are, X amount more happy, whatever it is. But I think, yeah, you can do the smallest of things, even if it's, I don't know, getting some food for someone. I made sausage rolls for a sales meeting we had the other day, and, the sales guys haven't stopped talking about them, and it's not anything special. It took half an hour of my time. I was quite happy pottering on, watching some rubbish on Netflix or something. It's those small things that then they do make you feel so much better, because then you're suddenly thinking to yourself, even if I'm having a really rubbish time, I've maybe helped someone else who might have been having a really rubbish day. And, even the recognition afterwards, not that you do it for that at all, but when people say, that was really kind of you, you didn't have to do that. And you think, well, no, I didn't, but that was a choice I made. I wanted to do that. And it always makes you feel better when you do.
It's a shame you didn't bring the sausage rolls today, though.
Yeah, no, I suddenly realised when I said it then, I was like, God, I've made a mistake here.
And what you talked about the example of like making things for your team, giving them time. Do you do any volunteering work, for example? Do you work with any charities?
Yeah, so I work alongside 2 other charities as sort of like a support role in my spare time. So I work with they're both youth mental health based. So there's Lumi, which is a new startup, which is absolutely amazing, run by Dr. Mark Cox, really cool guy. Incredible sort of work that he's doing towards all of that, sort of going into schools, doing pilots, starting in January. So hopefully when this is released, we've got a bit more news on all of that. So I would recommend checking that out. And then I also work with the Jasmine Foundation, which is a charity based in Scotland. That's my friend who passed away when I was 14. It's just run by her mum and dad. Again, really amazing, really incredible cause. So it's something I'm so passionate about, mental health as a whole. So having these opportunities to work with these charities that align so incredibly well with my own sort of values and beliefs, I think is really important. And it's nice because you have that sense of community as well. You don't work with a charity for free unless you're interested in it. So everyone I'm speaking to is just as invested as I am, which is really lovely, because often I get worried that I waffle on a bit, as I may be doing today. Sorry, everyone. But it's lovely to have that sort of space where, everyone's got that shared, drive, that shared goal and aim that keeps changing and getting bigger and better and more incredible. So, yeah, it's fab. I'm excited to see what happens in the future with it all.
Lovely. I can reassure you, you're not waffling on.
I get panicked sometimes.
No. What you're saying is going to be of real value to people who are listening.
I hope so.
And it's been brilliant so far. So let's continue exactly the same.
Keep powering on, yeah.
Yeah. This has been brilliant, and I really appreciate you perhaps stepping out your comfort zone to come and sit and do a podcast today. Yeah. But that is a true representation of giving. Is also to me to give truly is to do something that's perhaps difficult or uncomfortable to do.
But also you're giving by doing this podcast in the first place, and you're giving by just inviting me on. It's such an incredible privilege. I can't believe I've actually got this platform, to be honest. I'm sort of slight imposter syndrome, if I'm going to be honest, but I think I'll be listening to this in March thinking, Inga, shut up. But here we are.
Well, let's move on to one of the other ways, and the one I'm going to look at is learn. So you're currently doing a sales apprenticeship with Pareto.
Yes.
And you went to Newcastle Uni.
Yes.
What did you study?
I studied English language, so not quite a straight sort of career progression into sales, but
all
worked out.
And tell me, tell us more about that then. What was it like transitioning from studying books to sales?
Yeah, it was huge. Obviously, as I said earlier, this is my first big girl job, as I call it. So it's insane, going from the university lifestyle, which is obviously a bit nutty, especially at Newcastle. I'm sure any younger listeners and older as well, to be fair, can completely relate. It's been mad. It's been such a massive change of lifestyle and mindset and priorities and everything. My biggest thing used to be is Greg's going to be open in Jesmond the morning after a night out to make sure I could get my sausage roll, and now it's, I need to prepare for a podcast on mental health. Very different things, but it's nice seeing the change. And at the moment, sort of all of my friends that are my age, it's really interesting because there's such a split. There are people like myself who have gone into their first sort of proper roles, well, not proper, like their big jobs, whatever. There are others that have gone travelling and are either still, living their best life in Australia or Vietnam or whatever. And then there are people who are living at home and they're saving up for maybe their first flat, or, they're still searching for a full-time job that they're, aiming for. So it's a really interesting time because everyone's mindsets are so different, but we're all, luckily, still there for one another. I can talk to my friends who have just got back from travelling and relate to them on some level, even though I didn't do that. I can still have a chat on and see how they're doing, because the stress of coming out of uni and, the grad market at the moment is just painful, to say the least. It's so competitive everywhere. So understanding that that's something that everyone is sort of going through at the moment, I don't know, it's an exciting time, but it's sort of nerve-wracking. I think I veered quite a lot there, sorry.
No, that's fine. If you say went back to your time at university, did you find that when you were in the library learning new things, or whether you're in a lecture, or whether you're now when you're doing your sales apprenticeship, or you're learning from let's say a more experienced colleague, do you find does that energise you in any way?
Yeah, definitely. I think learning new things is, obviously, it's one of the 5 ways of wellbeing. It's fab. It's, it sort of stretches parts of your mind that you may not have delved into before. I'm quite a creative person. Obviously, working in sales, it's not really utilised in the job, but you do things outside of work. I'm recently doing a stint in the workplace design team at Sharp, and that's learning a whole new way of things. I'm learning about our suppliers, or speaking to the account managers, learning about their past, what's worked for them, maybe what hasn't worked for them. And yeah, at uni, some of the modules I did, I won't lie, I wasn't that interested in. Don't tell my lecturers, please. But others, you could really, really throw yourself into, and you can do an insane amount of research. Google Scholar, I spent far too many hours on Google Scholar. But yeah, it's fab being able to, at the moment we've got such a breadth of information and knowledge and learning resources right at our fingertips. It's incredible, really. It can be extremely overwhelming, especially when trying to write 10,000 words. But I think it's fab because you can sort of just teach yourself anything. Like my mum's on Duolingo at the moment, teaching herself Spanish. It's like, why not? It's there, you can do it, and she's loving it. And yeah, I think it's a really good outlet to have, especially when you've got a job like sales, which is obviously very demanding. I think it's important to have external interests, if that makes sense, like other things that you can sort of do and devote time to. Yeah, I think it's really important, because then you sort of give your mindset that space.
It's interesting. Yeah, you won't get sort of caught up in one particular mindset, or even actually caught up in a problem.
Yes, yeah. Constantly on the go, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's currently, I can't remember what language he's learning. I think it's Spanish or it might be Portuguese, but he works in the tech sector, and he likes the idea of working abroad. Yeah. So in his spare time, he's going and doing lessons and learning that language. Yeah. So it's got a purpose for his career, but it also is completely different. He sells tech during the day, and then a couple of nights a week, or maybe once a week. I don't know how often he goes. Yeah. He goes and does a Spanish or a Portuguese lesson. Yeah, and it just takes his mind to a different place. And he seems to do pretty well out of it from a wellbeing perspective.
Yeah, and to be able to put it on your CV doesn't hurt either.
No, it's good for the CV. What do you do to stay active?
So with active, I think that's definitely something I've got much more into since I've started my job. So before uni, I was quite active. I used to do lacrosse at school and netball. I was a rounders fiend. When I went to uni, I think, as happens with quite a lot of people, sort of the interest dropped off as I found other activities. But yeah, recently I'm quite diligent. I do yoga most days, which is really lovely, just 10 minutes. I struggle to do things like what is it in the morning? Meditation. I struggle to meditate just because my brain can be quite hyperactive at times, and it's difficult to calm it, which I know is the whole point, but it would take about 3 hours, I think, at the moment. So doing that kind of morning practice really helps. And then I started listening actually to a podcast by a lady called Cassia Turney. I think I'm allowed to say her name if it's a public domain. But it's absolutely incredible. I'd recommend it to anyone listening. And she speaks about her sort of journey to fitness. And she started off just by going on walks, which then progressed to jogs, which then progressed to runs. So I'm sort of on that journey now. It's obviously difficult now that it is sort of pitch black at 3:30 in the afternoon. But it's a really lovely thing, because I think that is a really healthy way of sort of tapping into your thoughts. If I've had a stressful day at work and I go on a run, I come back and I feel infinitely better, it's really irritating, because for the longest time everyone says, if you feel down, try and get outside, get some sunlight, do some exercise. It's annoying because it is actually true. You know, I'd much prefer if it was like, you know, eating a tub of ice cream on the sofa, watching some rubbish makes you feel better, but it doesn't really in the long term anyways. So yeah, I think with fitness, it's sort of like a Pilates, yoga, and then I say running, but it's more of a sort of wheezing and then attempt again sort of situation.
Well, insofar as names, you can say any name you like. If you say a name you didn't want to say, then we'll just mute it anyway.
Okay,
so
fab. I think I'm all right with all the names I've said so far. It's just been mum and her, yeah.
Yeah, you can rest assured on that point. And, you know, you talked about yoga, for example. Naturally, you might recommend yoga to someone else. So I'm not going to ask that. But I'll ask, why would you recommend yoga to a salesperson?
So I think obviously sales is a very sort of high caliber job. You know, you've got KPIs to hit, you've got targets to meet, you've got, you know, colleagues to compete with. It's an insanely high paced job, at least from my experience so far. I think I'd recommend yoga because it's all about, it's not high intensity. You know, you're not going to catch me in the gym doing a HIIT workout, you know, where it just looks like everyone's crazy, super amounts of energy. I think yoga's fab because it's about matching movement with your breathing. So it's all about being very intentional and very slow and having that kind of practice to, you know, even if you're just lying on the mat for 30 seconds and it's just about being present with your body, sort of tapping back into, you know, how you're feeling. It's like talking about my journaling earlier. It's very similar. I think having that moment just purely to yourself, not to be selfish, but sometimes you do need that time to sort of, is it introspective? Like when you look in, is that the right word?
Introspective would be like self-reflection.
Yes, yeah. So it's kind of like that, I suppose. And I think that's why I'd recommend it to salespeople, because it's very slow, it's very, you know, it's got a purpose and there's a reason to do each of the moves you decide to do. And, you know, you can do it for back pain or whatever if you fancy, but I just sort of do the one that I like the most at the moment.
And if you drew parallels then between being introspective or taking time to pause, and drew some parallels between that and sales, why would that behaviour be good for a salesperson?
Well, I think it's important because with sales you're making a lot of potentially very important decisions a day. You know, if I'm speaking to a client, I need to be able to listen to what they're saying really carefully, pick up on any pain points they might have to then be able to potentially help them and offer them a solution, you know, instead of maybe sort of jumping the gun and wanting to say, oh, I've got exactly what you need. Because the reality is you probably don't, you know, unless you've really had a good chat on with them and you've been talking for, you know, yonks. You're probably just sort of getting a bit overexcited. So I think it's important to have that level of stillness. I think that would be the right way to put it, stillness. So that you can sit and properly sort of tune into what they're saying and listen to the way that they say things. You know, if someone says, oh, well, we've just got a new IT provider. Or if someone says, oh, well, we've just got a new IT provider. You know, I could listen to both of those and not hear the difference if I didn't take the time to actually properly listen, I suppose. And it's about doing that and, having that sort of quietness and stillness. And sometimes the power of silence in sales is so important. You know, letting someone speak, as I think you're doing quite well at the moment. You know, letting someone speak, because sometimes, you know, a problem will unravel itself in that moment rather than, you know, jibbing in.
It's interesting that you talk about the importance of listening. We had a customer event last week, which is our GST event at the London Stock Exchange. and one particular customer he works in sales enablement, and I didn't get that long with him. We were talking in the bar afterwards, and I can be quite self-critical afterwards, but it's being self-critical is probably where it becomes a dangerous behaviour. Self-reflection is, I think, a really positive behaviour. Sometimes I'm too critical of myself, but the point being is I look back at that conversation and felt that I talked too much in that conversation. Like, I don't get very often with this person, director of sales enablement, you know, the exact ideal customer profile that I want to talk to. And I think that's a really good, what you said is a really good learning point for salespeople and also for salespeople's mental health. Is that listening is critical, but also if you're going to practice something like yoga or some stillness, or even if it's a run or a jog, whatever you choose to do, you're probably going to put yourself into the right mindset to be a successful salesperson, as well as promote your own mental well-being.
Yeah, I think it's important to find the sort of, you know, work-life balance nowadays, and just having that space to sort of look inwards and think, you know, has what I've done today, what's it done to my head? You know, how am I feeling about the way that I spoke to that customer, or how am I feeling about the way that I led that meeting, or whatever. It's good, and I'm very similar to you. I'm very, very self-critical, so I know I'll probably come away from this podcast and think, oh, Inga, what are you doing with your life, you know? But it's about sort of creating space for those feelings and appreciating they're not true. That's just yourself being a bit of a bully sometimes, I think.
Yeah. But I think of the guests I've had on so far on the podcast, and naturally pick people who are more in tune with mental health, so therefore might be those people who are more self-critical. Everyone's finished and said, asked exactly the same thing, or a different variation of it afterwards, said, oh, was that any good?
How much rubbish did I speak?
and funny enough, that's exactly the sort of thing I would say if I was a guest on a podcast, but I can reassure you it's been really good. It's been brilliant, and so you don't need to ask that question at the end.
I'm definitely still going to, you know that.
The last way that we're going to talk about today, so just to recap, we've talked about connect, we've talked about give, we've talked about learning, and we've just talked about get active. So the finale, and I haven't gone in chronological order, which has meant you've had to flip your notes over and back forward.
Sorry if you can hear that in the background.
Oh, no, that's my fault, not yours.
I know I'm overthinking that.
Yeah. But the finale is take notice, and I love take notice because it's I've said it on the previous podcast, and I won't just try and say something different for the sake of variety, but I love rivers, mountains, because when I feel like, I think what I love about those sort of places is they're not man-made.
Completely natural at one.
Yeah, feel like it's natural, and I'm like, all right, this is kind of how it was intended by when it was created. But we're not going to get into the theology of whether it's created or whether it's by accident. But anyway, so for me, that is one way to really improve my mental well-being, is to look at my surroundings and just appreciate the beauty around me. However, sometimes it can just be very ordinary. So it can be getting a plant for your workspace. Another one could be taking a different route to work, or on a journey, or visiting a new place. Just to appreciate what's around you, so that you don't get caught up in the day-to-day or the norms. What things do you do to take notice, and how do they help your mental well-being?
So I think the first thing that came to mind when I initially read the 5 Ways to Wellbeing was when I was going through quite a tough time when I was at uni with my mental health. I spoke to my therapist and sort of offloaded a bit, as you're supposed to, obviously. And she said, keep a gratitude journal. So a little journal where you just write down every day 3 things, and they can be as tiny and as seriously, ridiculous as you may think they may be at that time. But I think writing them down creates a sort of, putting it into something physical. And I think so many people often overlook, if you've got a big sales meeting later on in the day, you're probably not going, oh, pink fluffy clouds and a sausage dog and my coffee's really good. You're probably thinking about that, but giving it space to sort of exist. Even if you're just like in the car, I sometimes will just say it out loud. I'll say like, how beautiful does the sky look? Or look at that little dog or whatever. I think that's the best way to take notice. It's appreciating the little things that just bring you a tiny smile, even if it's just like a couple walking along and they look really happy or something. It's those little bits that, can be so easy to overlook. But when you give them attention, I think it's really healthy for your mental health. It's
like the phrase, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, exactly.
If you think like, I need this to be happy, which they're your pounds.
Yeah.
They're like, right, I need a holiday to Barbados. I need to go to Australia to watch England in the Ashes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
but they're... It's almost like they're not the foundation of happiness.
Yeah. Life isn't about going after those massive things. It's about finding happiness in the day-to-day, in the mundane, in the routine. Like my yoga makes me really happy. I have vanilla coffee syrup at home. That makes me really happy. It's things that, are so tiny but will have, they just make life a little bit happier, which is nice.
It's also perspective as well. And like I'm in London tomorrow and by just thinking about how much I'd love to go to Australia to watch the Ashes, okay, that's one thing. But there's probably people in Australia who, in their mind, would love to come to London and say, see Tower Bridge.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I think that's a rubbish idea.
Yeah.
Doesn't excite me at all.
Yeah, fair enough.
But actually, it tells me I should take notice tomorrow and enjoy a different experience, a new experience, because someone out there would value that experience. And for me, my learning of going into London for our Christmas party 2 years ago is about take notice. It's about look for the nice things.
Yeah.
Because what we did for our Christmas party was we did a walking tour.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was doing something that I love in London. I love walking. And the guy was very charismatic, very interesting, proper Cockney.
Yeah, they always know everything, don't
Yeah,
they?
he knew everything, and I learnt a thing or two. I can't recite it now. Something about...
it'll come to you in half an hour.
It was something about the Thames being narrowed because of all the sewage that was in there that was stopping the flow.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, so a lovely topic of conversation. But at Embankment, you can actually see... where the river used to be wider. You can see the point where the Thames used to be.
Oh, interesting.
But there you go. That's a completely bit of nonsense trivia, unrelated to this podcast.
Every day's a learning day, yeah.
I was lit up by learning about that, but also started to take notice of London and the bits around London I liked.
Yeah.
And then that was significant for me because I've had a lot of mental health problems that originated when I was working in London.
Yeah.
And that is just proof that if by myself being able to take notice of the nice parts of London, I was able to completely shift my perspective.
Yeah, seeing it through new eyes almost.
Yeah, start to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I love what you say about the little things building up into the bigger things, and the bigger thing probably being a holistic mental well-being. If you've got a positive mental well-being, then anything can be enjoyable.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think there's a fab video of a guy and he sees snow for the first time and he's outside and I can't remember where someone probably saw it on Instagram or something, and he's so happy and he's so excited. And the video starts off with someone complaining about the snow and then saying they watched that video and thought, oh my gosh, it's beautiful, isn't it? So what, I'm 5 minutes late for work. In the grand scheme of things, it's not the hugest deal ever. I'm sure, obviously, if you have a meeting at 8:30 a.m. sharp start, maybe it could be a bit of an issue. But yeah, seeing things through a new perspective, like I'm type 1 diabetic, can be an absolute nightmare. But being able to appreciate the fact that I've got incredible technology, the amazing NHS behind me, suddenly it's, actually I'm incredibly lucky. that I've got that support in place. And yeah, it's a bit rubbish that one of my organs has decided not to work, but so be it. I've got the resources to deal with it, and I'm still here with my dextrose tablets and injection pen next to me, but regardless.
But you got the attitude of gratitude.
Oh, I love that. I might steal that attitude.
You could put that in your gratitude journal.
Might do, yeah. I'll put it in my journal.
You could maybe change the name of the journal to the attitude of gratitude.
Yeah, I feel like I should graffiti it. That feels like something that should be graffitied on, with like a tag, Inga, at the bottom.
Well, look, I just want to say thank you for coming all the way down.
Don't be silly.
And a little detour to Oxford to pick me up.
No, very scenic.
You were so keen to do this when I invited you, which is great. Sometimes they have ideas to do nice things and people aren't as keen.
Yeah.
That was a reflection of your interest. A great reflection on Sharp too. I just want to say thanks to them again.
Yeah, cheers, Sharp.
Because it wasn't not just the financial commitment, like with your expenses and that. It was also the day off work. But more importantly, it was the speed at which they were like, yeah, of course we're going to support Inga to do this.
There were sort of whispers going around the office, and I kept saying to my line manager, I keep hearing you saying my name and then mentioning, other people in the business, and he was going, never you mind. And I was thinking, oh God, is this the end of my time at Sharp or something? And luckily it wasn't. It was a fantastic opportunity. So I cannot thank you enough for the time that you've put away. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, it's lovely to have you, and I'm sure this is going to help a few people.
Yeah, well, even if, it's one person on one day, that is all I need to do, really.
Well, we'll probably only get 2 listeners, so hopefully a 50% strike rate.
Me and my mum or something.
But it will help me and you. So
exactly, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. Yeah, it doesn't matter how big the gesture is, great or small. If it gives someone a little smile, a little moment of gratitude, attitude for gratitude, then my job is done.
Lovely. Thanks, Inga.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Steve.